The problem isn't the car. The problem is your bank account. You check your balance. $42. That's everything you have until Friday. And right there, in that exact moment, a survival decision is made. Not a smart decision, not a long-term decision, but the only decision that feels possible. You ignore it. You turn up the radio to drown out the strange rattling noise. You tell yourself, it's probably fine for now. You hope. You pray. Not because you're irresponsible, but because you don't actually have a choice. 2 months pass, and then the inevitable happens. Your car breaks down on the highway. Now the problem is no longer $300. You need a tow truck, $200. The small issue you ignored has destroyed your transmission, $2,000 in repairs. And because you can't get to work, you miss 2 shifts, another $300 in lost wages. Because you didn't have $300 at the beginning, you are now dealing with a $2,500 disaster. This isn't bad luck. This isn't one of those things, and it definitely isn't a personal failure of discipline. This is a mathematical trap, a cold, measurable mechanism where the lack of money causes costs to explode. When you don't have a financial buffer, small problems don't stay small. They compound, they cascade, they spiral. This is the first truth most people are never taught. Being broke isn't just about not having money. Being broke means every mistake costs more. The world becomes less forgiving. Time works against you instead of for you, and the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. That's the real danger of living paycheck to paycheck, not the absence of comfort, but the absence of protection. This is where most conversations about money go wrong. Traditional financial advice tells a simple story. Wealth is framed as the reward for discipline. Poverty is framed as the punishment for bad habits. If you're struggling, you're told to stop buying lattes, cancel Netflix, be more responsible, work harder, make better choices. But that explanation collapses the moment you look at the math, because if poverty were simply the result of poor behavior, then the costs of living would be neutral. $1 would cost the same for everyone. A mistake would carry the same consequences for everyone. That's not how reality works. In reality, money changes the price of everything. Being poor doesn't just mean you have less money. It means the world charges you extra for not having it. This is what the video is really about. Not motivation, not hustle, not mindset posters. It's about a hidden surcharge built into daily life. A surcharge you only pay when your balance is low. The creator calls this the most expensive hobby you can have, being broke. And it shows up everywhere. When you have savings, problems are inconveniences. When you don't, the same problems become emergencies. An emergency room visit instead of preventative care, a payday loan instead of a short-term cash buffer, a late fee instead of a small oversight. Each individual charge looks small in isolation, but combined, they form a system that continuously drains you. This is why 2 people can work equally hard, earn similar incomes, and still end up in completely different financial realities. One has slack, the other has none. Slack is the difference between paying $300 now and $2,500 later. Slack is the difference between calm decision-making and panic. Slack is the difference between leverage and vulnerability. And this is where the video introduces the idea that reframes everything. Poverty is not just a lack of income, it is a penalty for lacking capital. The system doesn't ask why you don't have money, it simply charges you more because you don't. No lectures, no judgments, just higher prices, higher interest, higher stress. Once you understand this, blaming individuals for being poor stops making sense. The math was stacked against them long before the choice was made. And this leads directly into the framework that explains it better than most economics textbooks ever have. The Boots theory. Picture a situation that feels uncomfortably familiar. It's a normal morning, you're driving to work, nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, just another ordinary day, one of thousands you've lived before. Then suddenly, the check engine light turns on. Your stomach drops. You don't need to be a mechanic to know what that light usually means. A number immediately appears in your head. $300. $300 to diagnose the problem, replace a small part, and move on with your life. To explain this, the video borrows an idea from an unexpected place, a fantasy novel. The concept is known as the Boots theory of socio-economic unfairness, originally described by author Terry Pratchett through a character named Sam Vimes. And despite its fictional origin, it explains real-world inequality better than many academic models. Here's how it works. Imagine two men. One is wealthy, the other is poor. The wealthy man walks into a store and buys a pair of high-quality leather boots. They cost $50. They're well-made, stitched properly, waterproof, and durable. Those boots last him 10 years. The poor man wants the same thing, but he doesn't have $50. He has $10. So he buys the cheap boots, made of cardboard soles and thin glue. They look fine at first, but they fall apart after one season. The next year, the poor man has to buy another $10 pair, and the year after that, and the year after that. After 10 years, the math looks like this. The rich man spent $50 total and still has dry, comfortable feet. The poor man spent $100 total and still has wet feet. Same product category, same need, same 10-year timeline, completely different outcomes. This is the core of the Boots theory. When you don't have money, you're forced to buy cheap solutions instead of lasting solutions, and cheap solutions are rarely cheap over time. You don't pay less because you buy less quality. You pay more because you buy replacement after replacement. This isn't about bad judgment. It's about constraint. The poor man doesn't choose the worse option because he wants to. He chooses it because it's the only option available within his cash limit. This is the math of poverty. Lack of upfront capital forces you into decisions that have higher long-term costs. And once you're locked into that cycle, it becomes incredibly hard to escape. The rich man isn't just buying better boots, he's buying freedom from replacement, freedom from worry, and freedom from constant decision-making. The poor man, meanwhile, is stuck solving the same problem again and again, burning both money and mental energy each time. And this pattern doesn't stop with boots. It shows up in groceries, in banking, in cars, in housing, in healthcare, in time itself. Once you see the boots, you start seeing them everywhere. At this point, the boots are no longer just a metaphor, they're a pattern. Once you understand the logic, you start seeing it everywhere in daily life, especially in the most boring, ordinary purchases, the kinds of things no one thinks twice about until money is tight. Let's start with something mundane, toilet paper. If you have an extra $40 or $50 in your account, this decision is trivial. You go to Costco or Sam's Club, you buy the large bulk pack. The cost per roll drops dramatically. You're set for months, and you don't think about toilet paper again for a long time. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have $50 to lock up in toilet paper inventory. You have $4. So you go to the corner store. You buy the 4-pack. The cost per roll is 3 times higher. Same product, same brand, same paper. The only difference is how much money you had up front. This is what economists call the poverty premium. It's the extra amount you pay not because the product is better, but because you were excluded from the discount tier. And it doesn't stop at toilet paper. Laundry detergent, diapers, paper towels, razors, cleaning supplies, anything non-perishable punishes you for buying in small quantities, and small quantities are all you can afford when cash flow is tight. The result is something most people never consider. If you're broke, your personal inflation rate is higher than a wealthy person's inflation rate.
You experience rising prices faster and more intensely because you're permanently locked out of economies of scale. But groceries are just the surface layer. The poverty premium becomes far more aggressive once you enter the financial system. If you have money, banks compete for your business. They waive monthly fees. They offer overdraft protection. They might even pay you interest, however small. If you don't have money, the relationship flips. A forgotten subscription charges your account $25 when you only have $20. You're now negative by $5. The bank doesn't cover you out of goodwill. It hits you with a $35 overdraft fee. For one day, you effectively borrowed $5, and it cost you $35. That's an annualized interest rate in the hundreds of percent. When payday lenders do this, it's called predatory. When banks do it, it's called policy. Billions of dollars are extracted each year through overdraft and late fees, primarily from the people with the least ability to pay them. It's a quiet transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top, disguised as service fees. And this is usually where people object.
They say, just don't spend money you don't have. In theory, that sounds reasonable. In practice, it ignores something critical: human psychology. This is the part most financial discussions completely ignore. People love to talk about discipline. They love to talk about willpower. They love to assume that bad financial decisions are the result of laziness or low intelligence. But the science tells a very different story. When you are genuinely stressed about money, when you don't know how rent will be paid next week or whether your account will go negative tomorrow, your brain goes into survival mode. This state is known as scarcity mindset. Multiple studies have shown that financial stress reduces functional cognitive capacity by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. That's the same impairment as staying awake all night without sleep. This means something important. People who are struggling financially are not making worse decisions because they are incapable. They're making worse decisions because their mental bandwidth is already maxed out. Every dollar is a calculation. Every purchase is a risk. Every unexpected expense is a threat. Your mind is constantly juggling urgent problems, leaving little room for long-term planning. This is why certain behaviors show up repeatedly among people under financial pressure. Payday loans with 300 to 400% interest, lottery tickets, fast food instead of cooking, minimum payments instead of strategic debt reduction. To an outsider, these choices look irrational. From the inside, they feel necessary. When you're exhausted and anxious, cooking a healthy meal isn't just about nutrition. It requires time, energy, and planning, resources you no longer have. Fast food isn't chosen because it's optimal, but because it's immediate. The same logic applies to high-interest loans. The loan isn't attractive, it's the only option that solves the immediate problem. This is why moralizing poverty is so misguided. The system creates pressure, then blames people for cracking under it. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. The boots theory isn't only about money, it's about mental energy. The wealthy person doesn't just save money by buying quality items. They save attention. They save worry. They save decision-making effort. They don't think about replacing boots every year. They don't think about overdraft fees. They don't think about whether one small mistake will collapse their month. That mental freedom compounds just like money does. The poor person, meanwhile, is stuck in a constant state of low-grade panic, not traumatic enough to be visible, but persistent enough to be draining. Over time, that panic becomes the real tax. And this sets the stage for an even larger example, one that makes the entire system painfully clear. Cars. In much of the United States, a car isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. Unless you live in a handful of dense cities, you need a car to get to work, buy groceries, take your kids to school, and function in daily life. No car often means no income. This is where the boots theory becomes brutally clear.
A financially stable person approaches car ownership from a position of strength. They buy a reliable, slightly used Toyota or Honda, maybe 3 years old. The price is around $18,000 to $22,000. They either pay cash or qualify for a low-interest loan at 4 or 5%. That car runs for a decade with basic maintenance, oil changes, brakes, routine servicing. The total cost of ownership stays relatively low. The car quietly does its job and fades into the background of their life. Now look at the person without savings and with damaged credit. They still need a car. The need doesn't disappear just because their finances are weak. So they go to a buy here, pay here lot. The dealer sells them a high-mileage vehicle worth maybe $4,000. It's priced at $8,000, not because it's valuable, but because the buyer has no alternatives. The interest rate is 20 to 24%. Over the life of the loan, that buyer may end up paying $14,000 to $15,000 for a car that was never worth more than $4,000 to begin with. And here's the cruel part. That car is likely to break down before the loan is paid off. Now they're making monthly payments on a vehicle that no longer runs, while trying to figure out how to finance another one just to keep their job. The debt survives the asset. The obligation outlives the asset. This is not accidental. This is a risk premium. Society has labeled this person as risky, so it charges them extra for everything. Higher interest, worse terms, fewer protections. But the only way to stop being risky is to build savings, and the only way to build savings is to stop paying the risk premium. It's a closed loop. The person with money buys reliability and stability. The person without money rents reliability at extreme interest rates. And we haven't even reached the biggest expense of all, housing. If the Boots theory explains small purchases, housing explains the entire system. Housing is the largest recurring expense most people will ever have, and it perfectly illustrates why being poor is structurally more expensive than being wealthy. When you rent, every dollar you pay is pure expense. You gain no equity. You build no ownership. You're paying for shelter today and nothing tomorrow. In effect, renting is paying 100% interest.
But renting isn't a choice most people make because they prefer it. It's the only option when you don't have a down payment, decent credit, or enough income stability to qualify for a mortgage. To buy a modest home, you might need $10,000 to $20,000 up front. That number alone disqualifies millions of people instantly. Now consider the math. In many cities, rent for a basic apartment can be $2,000 per month. That same unit, if owned, might carry a mortgage payment of $1,200 per month. The renter pays more every month. The homeowner pays less and builds equity at the same time. But the renter can't save for the down payment because half their income is already going toward rent. The high monthly cost prevents the very savings required to escape it. This is the trap. The wealthy buyer lowers their monthly overhead over time and gains an appreciating asset. The renter locks themselves into a permanently higher cost structure. And it doesn't stop at rent. Rent increases every year. Mortgages tend to stabilize or even decrease in real terms over time. The homeowner's life becomes more predictable. The renter's life becomes more fragile. Being poor means you are renting more than just housing. You rent your shelter. You rent your money through credit card interest. You rent your stability through fees, penalties, and premiums. You are renting your entire existence. And here's the part most people never calculate. There is also a hidden tax on time. Money isn't the only thing poverty takes from you. It also takes your time. And time, once lost, is never recoverable. If you have a washer and dryer in your home, doing laundry is almost invisible. You load the machine, press a button, and walk away. The active time cost is maybe 5 minutes. If you don't have those appliances, laundry becomes an event. You travel to a laundromat. You wait for machines to open. You sit there while the cycles run.
You travel back home. What should have taken minutes now takes 2 hours. Yes, it might only cost a few dollars in quarters, but it also costs you something far more valuable, time you could have spent resting, working, learning, or being with your family. If you value your time at even minimum wage, that cheap laundry is suddenly very expensive. The same pattern shows up in food. In wealthier neighborhoods, grocery stores are nearby, stocked, and competitively priced. In low-income areas, those stores don't exist. Instead, there are convenience stores with inflated prices and limited selection. To access affordable food, you might need to take a bus. That means paying fare and spending an hour or more in transit. Again, the sticker price hides the true cost. These areas are called food deserts, but that term understates the damage. They're time deserts, energy deserts, opportunity deserts. Every basic task takes longer when you're poor. Paying bills, getting health care, replacing broken items, commuting to work. The friction of daily life is higher at every step, and that friction compounds. When tasks take longer, you have less time to earn more money. When you earn less, you can't buy time-saving solutions, so tasks continue to take longer. This is how poverty quietly steals your future earning potential. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't show up as a single dramatic event, it shows up as exhaustion. And by the time people talk about lack of ambition, the damage is already done. But this is where the video pivots, because understanding the math isn't meant to make you feel hopeless, it's meant to show you where the exit is. This is where the conversation shifts from diagnosis to strategy. Most financial advice jumps straight to growth. Invest in the stock market, chase an 8% return, build wealth as fast as possible. But for someone caught in the poverty trap, that advice is misplaced. When you're bleeding, you don't worry about building muscle. You stop the bleeding first. If you're paying 20% interest on a credit card, eliminating that debt isn't boring. It's a guaranteed 20% return. No index fund on earth can promise that. If you replace a $10 toaster every year instead of buying a $50 one that lasts a decade, the math is already working against you. Buying the better item isn't lifestyle inflation, it's cost control. The real goal at this stage isn't wealth, it's escape velocity. The video introduces the most important concept in the entire framework, the buffer. A buffer is a small pool of money that absorbs shocks. It turns emergencies into inconveniences. That first $1,000 in savings is not symbolic, it's tactical. With a buffer, a flat tire is annoying, not catastrophic. You avoid payday loans. You stop triggering overdraft fees. You gain negotiating power with yourself and with institutions. Something subtle but powerful happens once the buffer exists.
You can increase your insurance deductible, which lowers your monthly premium. You can buy in bulk and lower your per-unit costs. You can fix small problems before they explode. Money starts working in reverse. Instead of creating fees, it eliminates them. This is why that first chunk of savings is the hardest and most powerful money you'll ever accumulate. It flips the game from defense to offense. But here's the psychological trap. When people finally have a little cash, the instinct is to treat themselves. A nice dinner, new clothes, something to feel normal after years of deprivation. That feeling is understandable, and it's dangerous, because every dollar spent on comfort is a dollar not spent on permanent problem solving. Buying the durable boots, the reliable tires, or the dental visit that prevents a root canal isn't glamorous, but it buys future freedom. This requires a mental shift. Stop asking, "Can I afford the monthly payment?" Start asking, "What is the total cost of ownership?" That question exposes the traps hidden behind small monthly numbers. And once you start thinking this way, something else becomes clear. The system is counting on you not understanding this math. Here's a truth that makes many people uncomfortable.
The system doesn't just tolerate your financial struggles, it profits from them. Late fees are not accidents. Overdraft charges are not edge cases. Convenience fees are not minor details. They are line items in corporate budgets. Banks expect overdrafts. Credit card companies expect minimum payments. Dealerships expect buyers to focus on monthly payments instead of total cost. Entire business models depend on you not understanding the mechanics you've just learned. They want you to see $199 per month, 0% down, just sign here. Because the moment you look at lifetime cost, interest compounding, and replacement cycles, the deal falls apart. This is why salespeople redirect the conversation away from totals. They know that clarity kills profit. Disposable products are another example. Cheap razor blades, low-quality shoes, appliances designed to fail just outside the warranty window. The goal isn't to sell you something once, it's to sell it to you forever. When you start applying the boots theory, you become a bad customer. You buy fewer things. You replace items less often. You avoid high-interest debt. That's great for your life. It's terrible for companies that depend on churn and fees. This is where the video reframes money in a powerful way. Your real weapon is not income, it's liquidity. Liquidity gives you options. Options give you leverage. Leverage lets you say no. No to bad loans. No to emergency interest rates. No to convenience premiums. Every dollar in your buffer is a bullet in a quiet war against entropy. And the strategy becomes surprisingly simple. Audit your life for vampire costs, expenses that exist only because you don't have enough cash. Private mortgage insurance, high-interest car loans, overdraft fees, buying single units instead of bulk. Find the biggest leak, then cut everything else aggressively, temporarily, until you have enough money to plug that one hole. If fixing your car costs $500 and stops it from burning oil, selling unused items or working extra hours for a weekend isn't just side income, it's a strategic strike against future expenses. You're not working harder for consumption, you're working harder for freedom. And this brings the message to its final conclusion. This is the part most people avoid saying out loud. The game is not fair. It takes far more effort to go from $0 to $10,000 than it does to go from $10,000 to $100,000. At the beginning, the wind is in your face. Every mistake is amplified. Every delay is punished. Once you have momentum, the same system that worked against you starts working for you. This doesn't mean success is guaranteed. It means the rules change once you cross certain thresholds. Understanding this matters because it removes shame. If being poor carries a mathematical penalty, then struggling isn't proof of failure, it's proof that you're operating under harsher constraints. The mistake is blaming yourself instead of attacking the penalties. You don't escape by playing harder within the system. You escape by changing how the math applies to you. You stop paying the poor tax. You buy the boots that last. You create enough liquidity to say no to bad deals. And slowly, quietly, the hole stops getting deeper. This isn't a story about getting rich overnight. It's a story about regaining control, about moving from constant reaction to intentional action, from survival to strategy. Once you understand the mechanics, you stop playing their game. You start playing yours. You focus on durability instead of status, ownership instead of appearance, long-term cost instead of short-term comfort. That's how people actually climb out, not with hacks or luck, but with clarity. And this is why these conversations matter. We talk endlessly about success stories. We rarely talk about the traps. But once you see the traps, they lose much of their power. You stop walking barefoot through the system. You put on the boots that carry you out.